The following presentation is a production of Ride the Wave Media.
It's the Best Birth Podcast, where we interview experts that elevate you as you prepare your heart and mind to have the best birth.
Each episode will interview professionals, so you are prepared for pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. Our experts will build your confidence and empower you to trust your intuition throughout your pregnancy.
This audio is taken from videos on YouTube. Watch the entire episodes on YouTube at Birth Made Mindful. Welcome to the Best Birth Podcast. We're here today with guest Christina Packard to talk all about managing family expectations for bringing home a new baby.
Christina Packard is a writer and birth educator for Birth Made Mindful. Christina loves gardening, homesteading, and embroidery. She speaks French and enjoys teaching her husband and her children French. Christina has an established insect collection. She's also musical. She's a singer, piano, and trumpet player. She finds a thrill in anything DIY or craft related. She is the hard-working mother of 6 children. So along with her work, talents, and hobbies, she's also a chef, chauffeur, cleaner, and cruise director. Wow, Christina, 6 children. You definitely have experience managing those expectations when bringing a baby home.
Hopefully, yeah. We've done it a couple of times.
A few.
Well, we want to jump right in and kind of start from the beginning. So when you are a new parent, so just 2 people together kind of preparing their lives for the entrance of a new baby, what would you recommend as the way to prepare for this event?
That's an excellent question. I think there's a lot of monetary and physical things people think to prepare for. They have the car seat in the car, they have a stroller, maybe they've purchased a baby carrier or a wrap. But I think something really important to remember is that when they send you home with an infant, someone who is your genetic, biological flesh and blood, or if you're adopting someone that you've prayed for and worked for having, then you have a small infant in your home and everything is going to feel magnified. Everything's going to feel large. I remember when we brought our first baby home, our baby will be 15 in a couple of weeks here. We put her down on the bed and we just looked at her and said, how did they let us leave the hospital with her? There's no instruction book, there's no manual. And, we thought, okay, we got this. We've done the last 4 days in the hospital. She's ready to go. We have her. And I remember that first night we brought her home, we put her on the bed. We both took a nap right away. All 3 of us were exhausted. And then we woke up to feed her. And when we fed her, my milk was in. It hadn't come in yet. My milk was in. And she drank so heavily that she vomited, not just like spit up, she vomited. And it was coming out her nose. And so she was choking. And she was gasping. And I remember just being like, do we call the hospital again? Like, do we call 911? And we just looked at each other. We took a big deep breath. We got the little bulb syringe. So I think the things to prepare for are really difficult to name, to list off. But I think the most important thing is to kind of have a sense of reality that you're not going to have all the answers. You're not going to be prepared for everything that's going on. You're not probably even going to have like all the tools physically with you. But having resources like a supportive partner, a friend that you can call on, a mother, mother-in-law, sister, someone that you feel like has maybe some birth experience or mothering experience. Those are good people so that when she throws up again, or when there's an explosive diaper and she can't seem to keep anything down, or when he's colicky and won't stop crying and you fed and burped and swaddled and changed, bathed, and you've done everything you can, then you can rely on someone to kind of walk you through those difficult moments. For baby number 1, I think something really important to do too is try to have as many things in your home as you can so you don't feel like you have to leave. Whether you or your partner leave separately, individually, to ask someone else to come and do it. There's a lot of delivery services nowadays, but having, as many diapers and wipes as you think is necessary for those first weeks, having, like we just talked about, a bulb syringe or something to get the snot and the mucus out of the baby's nose and mouth. Having those things in your home in presence will let you have a peace of mind that if you did have something come up that you weren't expecting or preparing for, that you would have it at the ready and you don't have to run out and get it.
Oh, I think that's so important. Like the emotions that you feel with your partner when neither of you know what you're doing, and then all of a sudden you almost feel like you have a medical situation or a screaming baby. And you wonder, what have we gotten ourselves into? I remember so many like middle of the night discussions where we would try to find the answers and establishing first and foremost that you're in it together. Both of you are new and you are going to take it one step at a time, focusing at the problem that's right in front of you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good advice.
And how do you prepare young children for this new baby to come home from the hospital if it's a multiple or your second or third?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I think children are very intuitive. I think they can sense and feel the energy and emotions of parents when they, whether it's through the pregnancy or later on in the pregnancy when the mom's really showing and really having a harder time bending down and tying that baby's shoes or putting on their snow boots or snow pants. So I think a lot of children, regardless of how far apart you're spacing your children, kind of pick up on that. They begin to know something's changing, something's different in the family. At least for us, we had 5 children in 8 years. So our first 5 are 2 years apart. And then we had a 5-year gap between my fifth and sixth. So there's very different things that I can share with you throughout that. But I think between the first and second, we really made sure that our first knew that there were going to be changes, that things were going to be different. We talked very honestly and openly. And, of course, at her level, we weren't talking to her as if she was a teenager. We were talking to her as if she was an almost 2-year-old. Reminding her, when mom comes home next time, and because we didn't really have a scheduled plan about when that birth would happen. Most people, even when they have a scheduled C-section or even when they have an induction, they don't even know if and when that baby's going to come home with them. But saying, here's a little baby doll or here's a little stuffed animal or something that they can hold and cuddle, practicing being kind and gentle, soft touch. There is a very strong tendency for older children to feel jealousy. And like Sarah was talking about, there's a lot of emotions. Parenting is emotionally invested opportunity. There's so many things that you're feeling that you've never before felt. If you're a family of 3 and then you become a family of 4, you'll never know what that will feel again, adding a second baby to number 1. And so really reminding that oldest child that they are important, they're valued, they're still such a valuable part of your life and your emotions and your decisions to bring home this baby is a really smart thing to do. And then something we encouraged some of our friends and family was that when we come to see the baby, the second baby, to kind of pay attention to that first baby, whether it's with a gift or a book or a letter or a note, just loves and hugs, extra attention, so that that first baby, regardless of the age difference, feels that love from visitors of the new baby.
Oh, individual care for each of your children really makes them feel valued. I remember reading a book that talked about having a 10-minute period every day for each child. And that's for the mom to spend with that child or the dad to spend with that child. So they're really feeling like their tank is full. They don't have to express their emotions, taking it out on their younger sibling, saying, hey, what I really need is my mom or dad to pay attention to me. And so what I'm going to do is hit this baby. And so that is such an important thing to remember, is that like those little children, they need a lot of reassurance that you still care for them, that you are still willing to put everything aside to be there for them.
Something we've done over the years is adapt the bedtime routine. And a big component is talk time. And my oldest son looks forward to that every night. He is a little worried when we can't have it and we have to shorten it. But I think that's a good time to interact with them one-on-one.
It's so amazing that you're able to share with us how you've managed your expectations, how you have included your children in bringing home additional babies. Let's talk about how some of those like everyday expectations have changed as you have grown your family.
That's an excellent question. And I think something else that Sarah brought up is that when we are thinking about the emotional aspect of a child trying to relate to that other baby or that other child, it's very difficult to try to say, this is anger, this is sadness, this is jealousy. But maybe, and I read an excellent book about just talking to the child at their level and saying, I'm mad, I'm mad, I'm mad, I'm angry, I'm feeling jealous, I want time with mom instead of baby, I'm jealous, and saying over and over, because a child's brain, and the way that this doctor presented it, was that it was like a Neanderthal. So I think in response to this question, with the expectations of having different ages of children, making sure, as was mentioned, with the talk time and with giving 10 minutes of individual valued time for each child, making sure that every child where they're at is experiencing the love and affection and the needs from the parent, which is so difficult. I was telling a friend that when we brought home Eames, he's my 6th baby, I've never had a high schooler, a kindergartner, and a newborn. In 3 weeks, we had a high school, a kindergarten, and a newborn all at the same time. And it was a lot for us. And we felt like, wow, this is a lot to handle at once. We've never had a child go to high school. We've never had our almost last baby start kindergarten. So all the children were in school. And this was a very new thing. So we dropped all the kids off at school. My husband was still on paternity leave. We came home and we just looked at each other and we promptly fell asleep because we had been so tired from that summer. We tried to pack so much in before we brought home this new baby. And then we had a lot of conversations through my pregnancy with my last saying, this is going to be harder because we're all older. We're going to remember it more. We're going to have more remembrances of what the baby's like coming to the hospital. My other children, my oldest was not yet 9 when we brought home her youngest sister. And so that's a big gap between 9 and 14 to remember and have these bonding moments with your youngest sibling. So I think we had a lot of expectations that, having another C-section, I wouldn't be able to be up and about right away. We did do a lot of fun things. We did hikes. We went to the balloon glow. We went to the zoo, into the aquarium. I tried to keep myself as active as possible to help stave off the feelings of postpartum depression or anxiety, but also health, talking about the mother's health and the needs of the mother, and making sure that the expectations are, when mom needs to sleep with the baby, then we're going to try to keep the house a little quiet. We have a rule that we are never super quiet when the baby's sleeping because we don't want our kids to only get used to sleeping in complete silence, because it's an unrealistic expectation when you have 8 people in a home to always be quiet when the baby lays down. But at least giving mom and baby a little bit of that reprieve from the expectations of laundry, meals, having to entertain, or having to keep the kids quiet. That's a nice thing to talk about, especially with older children who can help and sustain some of those responsibilities. I think another thing that we talked about in expectations was just making sure that they were careful and gentle and loving and nice with their baby brother or sister. Because even though they're not quite in that jealousy phase of maybe they're going to slap the baby on the head or maybe they're going to try to smother it with a blanket, there still is a lot of emotions of mom is taking so much time for this new creature, this new baby, this new person in our family, that they were feeling a little left out. So having expectations that, we love you and we want you in this family and you're vitally important, but sometimes the needs of an infant override the needs of, a 10-year-old who can make his own quesadilla at night for a snack.
Yeah, you always hear that like the newborn stage, like that postpartum period, the 4th trimester is so hard. But then adding on all of your other children, it just feels like an impossible task for everybody to get the sleep that they need and the rest and the healing when you have other children to manage. Thanks so much for sharing some of those tips on just like how you were able to make that happen and, setting the stage before it comes about so that everybody is prepared with what reality will look like for a time.
Are there any other changes that come to mind with growing your family and having more people in a home that change things?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, families have changed over the last 100 years, last 50 years, last 20 years. I feel like large families, whatever number you put there, can vary from family to family, person to person. We have the privilege of knowing a lot of families that have added, as they've had a second relationship and then they've added children into that family. But I think the beauty of bringing home children to a family is watching the responsibilities of children to care for one another and watching that sweet relationship grow. And I think that's something that's really been lovely for us, is watching our oldest and our youngest, watching all of the children take responsibility. I mean, they often fight over the baby. They often want to be the one to hold them and to change them and to feed them, but making sure that like there's that bond and that connectivity between siblings and reminding them that regardless of where we are in the world and the friendships that we have at that present time, when we grow or when we move or when things change and shift in a family, those relationships within a family remain. And so trying to establish really strong connections with one another and doing family traditions like special things on birthdays or special things for holidays, or trying to really make sure in our family we have a no exclusion rule. So when there's a friend over, like right now, my daughter has a friend over. My daughter isn't allowed to exclude her siblings from that playtime with her friend. If they need to have a moment together or be alone, then those things are appropriate. But we also really encourage each other to try to make sure that there's no hard feeling or harshness or exclusion when there's playtime here in our home, which has allowed our children to become really good friends and really bond and care for one another deeply. And that compassion and empathy and that kindness, I think, really shows strength of character and gives them courage to face some of the dilemmas and some of the problems that they'll have to face as they problem solve throughout their lives in the world.
Let's talk more about these family traditions. So when I think back to my own childhood, I can't remember the day to day. I can hardly remember year to year, but those family traditions are something that you will never forget. So maybe let's share 2 or 3 traditions that you feel like really have helped your family, and you could give some suggestions for our listeners on what they could do to establish some of these traditions.
And traditions are so fun because like they can come out of like a lot of thought and preparation, a lot of timing, or they can come out of a sporadic moment of we're just going to do this every year, you know? And so one of our traditions that's kind of grown over time is many years ago, as we talked about having 5 babies in 8 years, that particular year I was very tired. And so I have all of our birthdays except for one are within 7 weeks of each other. So we call it the birthday summer. From May until August, we all are packed in there really tight in those 7 weeks. So instead of wrapping gifts or putting them in bags, we hide them. And so I gather all the gifts and then I give them to the kids and then they get to hide the gifts. And we typically do it just in like 1 or 2 rooms, the kitchen, living room, upstairs rooms, bathroom. And then the child has to come out and find the gifts. So it's kind of like an extended Easter. And they love that. They absolutely love finding their gifts. And one time we wrapped them, they said, "Oh, I wanted to find my gift." So that came out of laziness and out of me not being able to go down and wrap the birthday presents for that year. So that's kind of a fun tradition. Something else that's always fun at holidays and people that celebrate any holiday, whether they have a religious preference or not, is making traditions revolving serving and loving and giving to others. I don't think there's anything more special than watching your children like work in a soup kitchen or work in, in a homeless shelter or pack up meals for, a hurricane or the first aid or first responders. So we as a family really love to carol. We go caroling every year. And we used to carol at the nursing home. We would carol inside the nursing home, and we actually learned sign language for 4 or 5 Christmas songs so we could sign to the deaf people that lived in the nursing home. Unfortunately, COVID took that caroling opportunity away from us, and we haven't been able to come back, unfortunately, since COVID. But we love caroling to our neighbors, and we love bringing them a treat and making sure that they feel loved and wanted. And then not just during the holidays, but every month of the year, we try to find large opportunities to serve as a family, whether it's during yard work, spring cleanup. We love to doorbell ditch, run around to our neighbors and leave little candies or leave bookmarks or homemade cookies, flowers for May Day. We love to make sure that we are giving back as often as we're receiving. And I think those traditions of serving and, again, thinking more of others in that empathy, in that kindness, in that sympathy, especially when there's a death in the family or when there's a sickness or when someone loses an employment or a job. I think teaching our children through tradition some of these things that we do really help us to find strength within our family. And I think another tradition that's really fun to do too is having everyone write cards to each other. We kind of talked about that birthday tradition, but having, birthdays and anniversaries and special days be all about that person and taking things that will be able to go from year to year. And again, it's not all about the amount of presents or the gifts or the money spent, but a nice, lovely card and words of appreciation and affection for that person really tend to draw close to one another.
I love how your traditions really center on what your family values and considers important. What kind of changes have occurred financially? How are we to budget for another family member when we feel like we're already stretched?
That's a great question. And truthfully, when we were going to have our first child, my husband he had just started school again. He graduated from Colorado State University, and we didn't have the resources and the finances that we thought we did. During 2008, when the recession happened, my husband was also laid off. And so that put us into a little bit of a struggle where I went back to work full time and then I was teaching piano. So throughout our married lives, we've always had employment, both he and I. We've always budgeted. I think the biggest piece of advice to give for financially is always live within your means. I don't think there's ever a proper or right time to have a baby. I don't think finances will ever, no matter how many children, no matter how much money you make, no matter how many jobs and hours you're putting in at the office, I don't think there's ever enough money to have a child because there's so many things that come up in that life of that child that you cannot predict. Kind of like what we talked about at the beginning. You can't predict when they'll break an arm. My daughter currently has 2 broken arms, and that was completely unpredictable. And so you can't budget out those things, but what you can do is always live within your means. So as you're earning money every month, make a plan. As Dave Ramsey really encourages us to budget, he encourages us to do envelope methods or have a spreadsheet, visually see your money coming in, And then every dime and dollar that you're spending, whether it's leisure, utilities, gas, insurance, food. And then he encourages us to save half of it. So he says, if you're making a certain amount of money every month, you put away half of that and you pretend like you don't even own it. It doesn't even come into you. It's not affecting your income. So whether that's net or gross is up to the couple. Excuse me. And so as you save half of that, you put that away. You put that money right away into whatever sort of account or CD or something with a high annual yield. I think that's been kind of a trick of my husband and I. Whenever we receive a tax return or birthday money or like a check from our escrow or something, an abundance of whatever it is, we put it all away. So we pretend like we don't even have that as an income. And so then when we have a broken arm or when our truck needs a new transmission or when we have to fix the sliding door of our van or when we have 2 broken arms and our deductible is higher than we're ready for, we need a new roof, we have the money to pay for those things. So we're not having to put it onto a credit card that we then can't pay off and our debt exceeds our income. So in terms of bringing another baby into the family, my biggest suggestion is really living within your means and spending and enjoying life and having moments where you are, going out and celebrating, but really think about what is the long-term objective? Where are the long-term financial goals? And how is this money working for you to get you there? Or are you feeling strapped every month because you're maybe eating out a couple too many times, or perhaps you're having one too many drinks? I know sometimes those garage sale signs are really addictive and I see them and I have to pull over. So saying, okay, I'm only going to spend $50 at garage sales for the entire summer and having that budget in mind and then putting it in $1 bills. And when it's gone, it's gone. That's all that you have. So I think the biggest key to raising children financially and successfully is really thinking, how can I make this money not only work for us, but how am I using this money to benefit my family? And again, something that I always think about too is, am I giving back and am I serving as much as I'm receiving? And charitable contributions, I think, are a way that a lot of people find personal wealth and growth management within their money, is how they can give back to whatever organization they feel inspired to give to. I find those are the people that always seem to be very wealthy in very many ways.
You're doing such great work raising children and building a community inside of your family and inside of your neighborhood and your city that you live in. That's just really incredible. Well, we want to kind of just wrap up our conversation about expectations. Is there anything else that you would share with us that can help our listeners prepare their hearts or their minds to manage their expectations with birth?
I think the most beautiful part about birth is that it's so individualized and it's so personal. And it's also so formative. It's life altering and changing. No matter how many babies you have, no matter how many times you become an aunt or a grandma or a mom, I think that you remember those moments. They're very pivotal. So being emotionally, mentally, and physically prepared are really important. But I also think making sure that the people around you are prepared in a way as well. For example, if you need help from a mother or a grandmother or a neighbor or a friend, talking about that as well, getting a village or a tribe, people talking about having people around you and whatever that looks like to you, asking someone for help making freezer meals before you have the baby, or asking someone to help take your children for a couple of hours in a week and then returning the favor. So saying, I know that when I bring my baby home, I'm going to have about a 6-week period that I can't do as much as I want to. Would you mind helping me take, Damien, Matthew, and Timothée out to the park, and then I'll take your children the following week and when I'm feeling a little better. So having realistic expectations for yourself and then those that are supporting you and helping you, having that community and people to talk to that you feel like are trusted is really important. And then again, coming kind of back full circle, really being honest. I think a thing that really plagues a lot of women and birthing people, mothers, is that we feel such guilt and shame when we can't meet the expectations that we've set for ourselves. So expectations can be failures. They can feel like we're not succeeding. They can make us feel guilty and shameful for our life. And no matter how much we prepare, there's things that we can't prepare for or the extent of what's going to happen. So I believe that having a conversation and saying, these are the things that I want to have done, and then falling back and saying, but here's the things that could happen if they don't. And I really need a little extra time, and making sure that, you're being honest in that communication. You're telling your children, I'm having a really hard day. And to say, when someone asks you, are you okay? And to say, no, I'm not. I'm really struggling today. And I just need a mental brain break. I need to go and binge a couple hours of TV and eat a bag of Cheetos with my baby in my bed. And that's okay, because that's motherhood. And if every day has to feel perfect and expectations are everything they see around us and on social media, that will make you encompassed in guilt and shame so much that I feel like you won't find joy in those day-to-days. Kind of like Sarah was talking about, like those moments just kind of flood together because motherhood is so extreme and it's so intensive. So giving yourself a lot of grace, a lot of patience, making sure that you're speaking very honestly and open with those around you, and then also being really realistic with yourself and allowing yourself to say, these are the things that I want to have done, and this is a timeline that I have. And if they don't happen, it doesn't mean that my value as a mother is anything less than what it should be.
I remember shortly after we had our first baby talking to a friend who hadn't had a baby yet and just saying, what did you do today? She's like, I changed the oil, I went to the grocery store, I hit the gym, my husband and I played some volleyball, and she probably listed 7 or 8 items. And I was like, wait, you did that today or like this week? That's what I did today. And I remember thinking with my new baby, I can only do one thing extra every day. And that was kind of where I sat mentally for a while after each of my babies was born, is that if there's just one thing that I can do that's a little bit extra today, maybe it was organizing those nursing bras, but one thing, not allowing myself to feel the overwhelm of trying to manage the same life that I had left behind. And when you talk about 6 weeks, I feel like that is such a short amount of time to think about having this change in your life, in your family, in your home. Like, it takes a lot of time for many of us to feel back to normal, that we have the regulation of our nervous system. And so just giving yourself as much time as needed to feel like you can get back into the swing of accomplishing those 8 things in one day.
Yeah. Like the COVID phrase, the new normal. There will never be another normal, because when you bring another child home and you become a family of, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, how many children you choose to have as a mother, your new normal is going to be completely different. And the face that you see in the mirror is going to be more wise, more sage, more discerned. I feel like we as women, we're so critical of what we look like and how we're carrying motherhood. But to think about these human bodies, creating a body that is going to be able to have all these life experiences and all these beautiful things that they're going to happen to them, and that we get to be the bearers of this life and the co-creators of this life, is such an honor and such a blessing and such a beautiful thing. And so I think when we kind of step back, like you said, and say, okay, have I accomplished anything today? And if the answer is no, except for loving, caring, and nurturing your child, then you've accomplished that.
Yeah, that is enough. Well, we love to share some of the resources that our experts recommend. Do you have any books that you would recommend to our expectant moms and dads?
I read a really good book called Womb. And I've read a couple other books. I've read a lot of books recently about child development through the teenage mind. There's one called How to Hug a Porcupine. So if any of you moms are bringing home babies or young children to a tween who's starting to become a prepubescent member of your family, the joy and treasure of having tweens and teens and all of that is a lot. And especially when you hormonally, like me, I mean, I should speak for myself, when I'm hormonally going through the changes of postpartum and then having tweens and teenagers on top of that, some of these resources about teenagers are just, they're exceptional. They've really reminded me that the transitions and the changes that we're all going through are so important and vital. But to go through it all together at the same time, like you were talking about, all these ages and stages at once can feel a little overwhelming. So there's a lot of excellent resources out there. I mean, I have a book list as long as my arm, and I can share them with the Best Birth podcast, and they can post those. So
Thank you. We'll love to share those resources. One of the books that I thought of that kind of went along with this episode was Gentle Birth, Gentle Mothering. And she says, set boundaries with love and consistency, helping your child to learn and grow in a safe and supportive environment. And just thinking about everything you shared with us today, having that consistency, building expectation management within our family, and allowing that as the platform for us to really welcome this new beautiful baby.
We like to end each episode with a Mom Squad secret. So I will share from Melissa a tip that says, start walking, especially in your second trimester, 2 or 3 miles a day. It is great exercise and a good time to clear your head and enjoy nature. And of course, incorporating this into postpartum as well. I remember my second baby was born in the winter and just really getting outside, and I made a goal to walk every single day. So yeah, I love that tip.
Christina, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners today?
We are so blessed to be part of the Best Birth podcast and to be able to experience as women and as mothers the transformative changes that happen. So I guess my biggest takeaway for myself and for others is just finding joy in this journey of motherhood. I think about with my oldest turning 15, it's amazing how I can remember the very moment that they laid her on me. And I remember snuggling and nestling and nursing her. And it's incredible to think that as a woman, you will have these memories your whole life long. And the fleeting cliche moments of, it goes by so fast, cherishing those moments, experiencing them, whether it's through video and pictures and journaling, but keeping these sacred and these moments so special to your heart because they really do speed by and they really do change us and allow us to be nurturers and kind, courageous, brave women who embrace other people in our journey of having the best birth and the best motherhood journey.
Oh, and what a treasure that each of us can remember that very moment when they lay that baby on our chest. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Best Birth podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on today's episode. We hope you've been elevated and inspired by this week's expert.
Subscribe today so you never miss an episode. And please share our podcast or post on your social media so that other moms and dads-to-be can also have the best birth.
Please note that the information provided is based on the expert's insights and personal experience. It is not intended as medical guidance. Please seek the advice of your medical provider as it applies to your specific condition.